Once again, may God be with you and bless you as we today are at our 137th day on our chronological read through of the Bible. We return back to the narrative again today as the fight, um, uh, as the flight and the fight of King David before Absalom continues. David is met by actually two different members of former King Saul's clan as he leaves Jerusalem. And these two members of King Saul's clan have two very different messages for King David. The first is Ziba. You might remember him from before. Ziba is Mephibosheth's servant. He brings out food, wine, and two saddled donkeys for King David. He casts a shadow over Mephibosheth, inferring that Mephibosheth, the only remaining heir to Saul's throne, is seeking to usurp the kingdom from from Absalom, the usurper. In other words, Absalom seeking to get the kingdom from David, and that maybe Mephibosheth has stayed in Jerusalem so that he can take the kingdom from Absalom. So David actually gives to Ziba all of Mephibosheth's property. Now, it may seem a bit hasty on David's part, but remember, David is desperate and he's going to need all the allies he can get. Wherever he's going to need allies from wherever he can get them, and he can work out any complications that this might create later if God restores the kingdom to him. So it's probably actually a rather wise move on his part. The second representative of Saul's clan is Shimei. He curses David. He attempts to stone David. One would expect that David would have him put down. After all, David's standing army is there with him. But David doesn't. He acknowledges that this message could be from Yahweh himself, and that he would leave it to Yahweh um, to repay Shimei for cursing the king if it was not a message from Yahweh, which actually Yahweh eventually does through King Solomon. Meanwhile, back in Jerusalem, Hushai carefully becomes a member of Absalom's court and advisors, very carefully responding to challenges by Absalom about his loyalty and effectively flattering Absalom without denying David. Absalom asked Ahithophel for his advice about what he should do next. And in keeping with David's prayer, the advice he receives that Absalom receives from Ahithophel is really very foolish. For he tells Absalom to directly contradict God's will by sleeping with David's concubines. It might seem odd that Solomon would consider such obviously ungodly advice, but at this point in time, Ahithophel's advice is considered not only by Absalom but by many others as trustworthy as God's own word, which is actually why David had prayed that God would make Ahithophel's advice foolish now. It would appear that Absalom regarded his advice as highly as he regarded God's word. And another of the judgments that God gave David through Nathan is fulfilled as a tent is pitched on the roof of the palace, and Absalom acts on the advice that Ahithophel gives in broad daylight. One must wonder if maybe Ahithophel saw somehow poetic justice as David's concubines are violated, even as David had violated Ahithophel's granddaughter, Bathsheba. Next, Ahithophel advises Absalom to stay behind, to send a force to pursue David and his companions immediately, overtake them while they're exhausted, kill only David, and bring everyone else back. This is actually very good advice. But God allows Absalom to prefer the advice of Hushai, um, the advice that he would wait, that he would assemble a massive force, that he would personally lead, because after all, David is cunning and he's a cunning and crafty warrior, and it's likely that he's not even with the group. In doing this, Hushai buys David and the group some time. He assures that Absalom will be exposed to the dangers of the battle. And he's also able to send a message to David and his entourage about both plans, just in case uh, uh, Absalom might change his mind and carry out the other. And he actually even is able to silence Ahithophel permanently because Ahithophel, after having his advice rejected, goes home, puts his affairs in order, and hangs himself. Likely he has perceived that either way this goes, and at this point he would not expect it to go well for Absalom, but that either way this goes, it's not going to end well for him. And if he were to be executed by either David or Absalom for treason, his family property would go to the throne and his family would be destitute. Basically, he's lost all hope in God. So he seeks to protect and preserve himself through man's means. On his way, once David is well beyond Jerusalem, he's greeted by three allies. Um, once King David is greeted by three allies once he's crossed the Jordan. He receives considerable supply from them. He sets up command posts, I guess you could call it, at the city of Mahanaim. David desires to go out. I mean, he knows that a battle is coming, so he desires to go out with the troops, but he's convinced that it's far better for him to stay behind, as he and he alone is the target. I mean, remember, this battle that's going to happen is essentially between David and Absalom. When either of them dies or is captured, battle's over. David requests that the troops be gentle with Absalom. He does not want Absalom killed. When battle is finally joined, Israel, which is the troops that are the people that are with Absalom, is soundly defeated by David's men. Notice that David's smaller force is able to lure Absalom's larger force into the forest and use the forest as their ally. You could say that even nature fought for the Lord's anointed. Indeed, Absalom finds himself hanging in a tree. There's a lot of symbolism in this. Absalom's head that he took such pride in becomes his downfall. That's what ensnares him in the tree. The donkey he rode that symbolizes Israel's loyalty to him leaves him. And the law of Moses declares that anyone who is hung from a tree is accursed by God. Clearly, Absalom is. David's men, knowing his wishes not to kill, knowing David's wishes, will not kill Absalom. They go and get Joab. But Joab does. While he is disobeying David's direct order, he's protecting Israel against more bloodshed. And David appears to understand this, at least eventually, for though he later faults Absalom for other murders, he does not include Absalom in those. Absalom's dead body was then immediately removed from the tree in accordance with Jewish law, but was buried under a pile of stones in the same manner that Israel buried the Canaanite kings that they had defeated. The news of Absalom's death, in other words, the news of Yahweh's victory, is relayed to David. Once again, I pray that our time together is helpful, that you're learning things you didn't know before, you're understanding things in ways that you hadn't understood them before. May God be with you, bless you. I look forward to joining with you again tomorrow.